with a few comments, and Zainab, if you could advance the slide. First of all, just a kind of reminder on the Zoom protocols. We're using a webinar format largely due to the kind of the security around the Zoom calls now. So we've tried to change that up. So hopefully folks are able to get in for the most part and be able to keep moving through that. And there is not going to be a chat feature as well for similar concerns. And then we have several panelists, and they'll be able to speak kind of throughout the time. So again, our meetings are every Monday at 4 o'clock. And with that, I'll turn it over to the governor for kind of a few introductory comments. And we'll see if Gary, I'm not sure if Gary Antone's on or not, so we'll catch up with him if he is. So
Gary is at
Great, well,
he cannot attend the meeting today.
okay, so Gary won't be with us. So all right, thanks, Zainab.
great. Well, hey, thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate it. And just to bring you up to date, we are continuing to work to expand the testing and buy more reagents so we can do that. You may have seen over the weekend that there were some issues in Grand Island with some concerns about the coronavirus spread there. And indeed, we do have a higher rate of people testing positive in Grand Island. So we're going to be organizing resources to be able to help with the contact management of people who we know have tested positive. We're also going to be doing more communication with employers and the general public, asking some of the large employers to create plans for how they're going to communicate to their teammates and keep them safe. And then also going to get more testing in Grand Island starting a little bit later this week as well. So those are some of the things we're going to do to quickly mobilize there to be able to see if we can get a handle on what exactly is going on in Grand Island. And just in general, we continue to, again, try to buy more PPE, more testing materials. We're working on expanding hospital space. So, so far we, see cases continue to go up over the last week. The number of cases have gone from like 30, gone 37, 38, 36, 33, 42, 42, 46. So you can see that if you plot that out, that is a slope that is increasing, but it's not going up geometrically. It's, going up at kind of a rational rate, which says the things we are doing are working, but we just got to continue to stick to it. So that's one of the things we'll continue to hammer as well, is that, people need to avoid the large public groups. If you go to the public parks, don't play team sports, don't play club sports. We obviously, with our DHM now infected across the entire state, part of that is that schools will operate without children until May 31st. So that is something we rolled out the rest of the counties for that on Friday. So again, we continue to take additional steps to slow down the spread of virus here in our state. So far, it seems to be working, but it's going to be a long month. April's going to be a tough month. The next few weeks are going to be really critical in us being able to slow the spread here in our state. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's on the call. And, again, I want to give a shout out to the superintendents who acted early, like Mark Shepard, Cheryl Logan. You all either went to spring break early or just continued from spring break into, operating without students. And I think that all makes, all the difference in the world with regard to a lot of these non-pharmacological interventions or NPIs that we put in place. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who, moved quickly, and appreciate all your help on this. So with that, Commissioner, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks a lot, Governor, and thanks for those fronts. I think we've got a couple of our local public health folks on, so I'll talk to them here in a little bit. But I know that our cases continue to increase, and I think I saw, and I suspect Gary's having to deal with that today. So I appreciate just all the close connection we've been able to have with you and your team. So thanks for that.
Hey, thanks. So, hey, and just so you know, I actually do have to hop on the phone to go talk with some folks here at 4:30, so I'll be hopping off a little bit early.
Okay, all right. Maybe we'll hit a couple of these big topics while you're still on, and then just cover some other things after you have to go. I want to kind of invite. I think we've got Tara and
yes.
See if it works. Yeah, so we got Tara Ewing and Kim Engel, I think, on the line. Tara is with Three Rivers area, and you can kind of see it on the map there, kind of Saunders County, Washington County, must be Dodge County, yes. I think. So And then also, I think we have Kim Engel on too. Is that right, Kim?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tara, I
Okay.
think.
Perfect.
So, Tara, I don't know. I mean, and Governor, you can chime in too. Obviously, we've entered directed health measures statewide. Both, I mean, the school DHM statewide was done, I forget, last Wednesday, but also I think the more broad DHM was done statewide on Friday, if I remember right. So I just
Yes, that's
wondered
correct.
if there were any updates on that front you wanted to share with folks. About what that means for us statewide now.
Well, just from my standpoint, again, we got some more community spread, so that's why we rolled it out for the remaining counties, because it really covers probably about 10% of the remaining population. So just from a ease of communication standpoint and management standpoint, logistics standpoint, so it brings us all under the DHM that involves things such as, restaurants and bars cannot have dine-in customers. They got to do takeout, carry-out, delivery. They've got to, or drive-through, and all the elective surgeries have to be canceled. So no elective surgeries in order to preserve PPE, OR space, and can be turned into ICU space, and then of course the staffing that goes along with that, and then that also applies to dentists and veterinarians. And then just the same standard thing, 10-person rule, no gatherings bigger than 10 people. Businesses can't have more than 10 customers in them, all properly spaced 6 feet apart, that kind of thing. So that's what that DHM means. And the other thing too, if I could just highlight, one of the things we rolled out today was one of our things we're trying to remind people about everything we want them to do, which is continues to limit your social interaction. So the slogan is stay home, stay healthy, stay connected. And that's, about, do your business, when you go shopping, only one person should go, make a list, be efficient, go in and out, do it once a week, to limit your exposure. We want people to stay healthy by doing that, but also stay connected. Don't become isolated. So this week we'll be focusing a lot on not becoming isolated. We had Lynn Lang from the Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual Abuse and Domestic Violence talk about some of the issues there, because when we see disasters like this, we see an increase in violence, domestic violence. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about child abuse, and to just give you a little bit of a precursor, one of the things we're going to be talking about is the number of calls into our child abuse hotline is down because teachers are such a big part of reporting that. So we want people to be on the lookout for that. If you're staying at home more, that means victims could be around their abusers more. And what has happened in other large disasters is that when kids are not in school, more abuse happens. And then when the kids come back to school, we see a spike because teachers are able to start reporting and protecting the kids. So we're really trying to raise awareness about that. And I think obviously you all can be key in helping do that, with continued engagement with your students and teachers to be on the signs for that child abuse.
No, and Governor, thanks for sharing that. I've had a couple questions from school folks, kind of wondering how to, I'll almost call it, check in on families and things along those lines. I know we're doing a lot of different things. I mean, one of the concerns is even kind of going door to door is probably not ideal in this environment, or doing home visits, obviously isn't ideal, but do you want us to kind of work on a strategy? Would that be helpful, or have discussions about that among the education folks on how to kind of keep tabs on families?
Yeah, that would.
Case?
Again, just like everything else, like say, making sure that you all are delivering meals to those kids who depend on the schools for nutrition. I think this is another one of those channels where I'd ask you to be creative about how you do that, because teachers are such an important part in reporting child abuse, to figure out, are there creative ways that you might be able to continue to do that?
Okay. Yeah. So we'll definitely have some more conversations about that here in the coming days. So thanks for that. Tara, would you care to highlight kind of some of the things you're seeing kind of at the local level? And we'll see if Kim has joined us or not. I don't know if she has. So
Yeah, no, you betcha. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I sure can.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tara Ewing. I'm the health director for the Three Rivers Public Health Department. So I get the honor to serve Dodge, Washington, and Saunders County here in eastern Nebraska. We did stuff a little bit early. We started working with our ESU2 director, Ted DeTurk, and Gina Ewing and I share the ESU2 district. We have Burton Cumming, which are Gina's, and then we have Dodge and Saunders, which were mine. So we went, did some meetings, had the opportunity to talk to our superintendents. And I think if I had to tell you, I talk to my superintendents on a regular basis. And I think they look to us for guidance, which I think is absolutely terrific. Right now in my health jurisdiction, I have 30 cases between the 3 counties that I serve. I've got multiple community spread, but reiterating the decision that was made early on to close school in the ESU2 districts, because we knew that it was coming and we knew that we needed to hamper down and get people to stay home. Right now, I know of 3 cases that had we been in school, hadn't done what we did, we could have a very, very different outcome. And that's just within the schools that I know of, with either having a close contact of a confirmed case in my jurisdiction or having an actual teacher that's a confirmed case. We're starting to get into where now we're seeing probable cases where they have a direct epi link to somebody that's positive and they've self-isolated and they haven't been at school. So this could not be working any better for us. It's great. The collaboration that's being done statewide with all the superintendents, the health directors, and then of course you also, Commissioner, we're very, very fortunate with, and also our ESU2 director is wonderful. All of our school districts have taken our advice, have worked collaboratively with us, and really are doing their best to try to keep their students and the families that they serve as healthy as they possibly can.
Commissioner, would you please unmute your mic?
Sorry. Thanks, Tara. Kim,
Yes.
I think we got Kim Engel on as well. So Kim, if you want to kind of give a perspective from the Panhandle, and then I got a couple questions for you. So.
Okay, thank you. Kim Engel, Director for Panhandle Public Health, and I echo Tara's words as far as all of the superintendents in the Panhandle and ESU. I feel like we've had a great working relationship. And we continue to work through, ongoing questions and struggles, because none of this is easy. I want to give you an example. Last week, we had several cases confirmed in Kimball County. Kimball would be the county that's closest to Colorado and Wyoming, so I guess it's not a real big surprise. But several of these cases then had connections with the healthcare system in Kimball County. And we were just fortunate that next day we had 2 people from the state epi folks, Brian Buss and Derry Stover, out, and I think they were, just wanting to make sure our systems were all in place and to give us assistance. And after working through those first confirmed cases and all of the close contacts and probable cases and potential exposure sites in town, their recommendation was pretty firm. And it was, of course, we put all of those folks in quarantine, but then the advice to that county was everybody else should self-monitor for twice a day and practice strict social distancing of 6 feet apart and not gathering more than 10 people. And a lot of our communities are small. That county is a little less than 3,000 people. So you can imagine the shock that created. We continue to work cases and we continue to get more cases confirmed. I think there's 10 now confirmed cases out of 30 tested. And one of those, it looks different on the Nebraska map because one of them has a Wyoming address, but they're actually in Nebraska. So there's always those quirky little things. But anyway, when we gave that advice, then that really put the school in a tough spot for lunches, because there are people that were doing that were scared and they were taking our advice to heart. In a matter of hours,
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And we'll actually talk a little bit more about the kind of the emergency feeding provisions. But while the governor's still on, a couple questions that I think have surfaced, and I'd be curious if Tara and Kim and the governor, if you'd talk to this. I mean, the kind of concern around food and what happens around kind of safety for folks that are working to help deliver the food. And this Kimball example is a good example of that. Do you see needing to address that from a further guidance perspective? I know I've had a couple superintendents ask, you know, how do we ensure, or you know, or if we run into problems like we have in Kimball, what are our best approaches? And again, I don't know that you have answers for that, but would you be willing to address that, and then we can keep kind of talking about it anyway?
Yes. So this is Tara. I can talk a little bit about what some of the schools are doing here within my jurisdiction. They also have feeding programs set up. I know that Fremont Public Schools, who is my biggest school, just switched, and I believe it'll be this week, to delivering or having food prepared and available for pickup now twice a week, where that would actually be able to, you know, feed them for that week. So I'm anxious to see what that's going to look like, you know, because that actually might be something that's more of a benefit for families, especially that do work, instead of having to try to go every single day. So that's something that we're going to be trying here in Fremont. I know all of the schools are doing some way, shape, or form of trying to ensure that the kids are eating. And I think as we go through this and we have our weekly meeting, I have a weekly meeting with the ESU2 director and all of our superintendents. I look forward to hearing from them on how that's going and maybe what some of their needs will be as we move forward.
I appreciate that. Is there any, I mean, Governor, I think you got to go here pretty quick. Is there anything else you can think of from, as we keep working on the health perspective? I'll throw out one, you know, I probably will be a conversation later in this call, but I'm getting still a lot of questions about graduation, and protocol wise, I've been suggesting that folks work with their local health departments to know what's kind of how to handle safe environments. Is that your recommendation still on how we might proceed with such things as we try to address the challenges we have?
Yeah, I mean, graduations are going to be tough to plan right now because we just don't know when the restrictions will start loosening and how much they will loosen. So, you know, I think OPS is going to try and do something in August. I think that's a good timeline to start with the planning. But again, I think just everybody's going to have, you just have to pay attention to see, you know, how the spread of the virus progresses. And as we loosen restrictions, it will not, just like we put restrictions in asynchronously across the state, we'll probably loosen them the same way. So it'll also be often, you know, maybe on a ESU or school district kind of basis or public health department basis, more likely, that we loosen restrictions. So it may be different across the state. You'll just have to kind of pay attention, but I would say planning anything before August is probably going to be risky.
Well, thanks so much for that.
Other than virtual.
Yeah, so there is some talk about virtual. There are some talks about drive-up graduations, but again, I want to be hesitant on any of that without kind of local health guidance and things along those lines. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, if you have a ceremony that's planned where people are staying in their cars and you're not exchanging anything between cars, that would be good. That obviously makes it problematic to hand out a diploma because that would defeat the purpose of not having a large group. So you can't really hand out diplomas, but as long as everybody stayed in their car and didn't have any exchange back and forth between the cars or any other people, that would be okay. But like I said, you can't hand out a diploma.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense, and I appreciate that, Governor. I think, well, I'm going to go ahead and move in, and I'll invite Kim and Tara to kind of be able to chime in as we keep going here too. But I want to move to the next slide with our ESU panelists that are on today, and I think we've got Dan Schnoes.
Okay, Commissioner. Hey, so Commissioner, I'm gonna go ahead and hop off then. But thanks again for having me on the call. I appreciate it, and we'll be talking soon.
We'll talk soon. Thanks, Governor.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. So I think we have Dan Schnoes on, Andrew Dick from ESU 13. I think Larry Ann Polk is on from ESU 7. I think those three. And invite you to kind of chime in. I know you, and first of all, thanks to all the ESUs. These are kind of the three that will be spokespeople for all the conversations that are happening around the state. And I kind of had three big areas to discuss with you, but the three big areas being kind of what the statewide directed health measure and some clarifications around that, which maybe we covered a little bit already. I think one question was around how to handle teacher evaluations or certificate holder evaluations, and then some end of the year reporting. So I think they're all still muted yet. So I think you can unmute and we'll engage in a conversation. Hi, Larry Ann.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I can start. I know our service units meet every week a number of times with our health departments and our superintendents and education leaders in our area, and try to gather some questions we have in common and tap into the resources that we can to try to answer their questions. And regarding the statewide DHM clarifications, I know some of the questions that have come up around that were answered by the governor and yourself regarding graduation. But another area in that, under that same DHM clarifications, has to do with checking out students and checking in students and checking in equipment, and how that can be done. You know, it's our understanding that students and parents can't congregate in the school to do that. And we have some really creative ways on how our schools are planning to do that, but I didn't know if you would want to provide any comments to our schools with regard to check-in.
Yeah, and I don't think that we've had a lot of detailed conversations, but I think oddly enough, the food environment kind of gives us some ideas maybe around that. I just had a text from Mark Shepard from Fremont was talking about what they're doing on food delivery, like wiping down a table and people drop things by. Almost, there's probably a lot of different ways that you can do it in a safe way, but I mean, I think the main key is that at the end of the year when you're needing to pick things up or otherwise, being really thoughtful about, you know, number one, maintaining the kind of safe distance, maybe a kind of a drop zone area for folks to drop things off, and some approaches maybe that could get a little more guidance on what that might look like. You know, keyboards, oddly enough, like on computers, so if you're picking up keyboards and computers, I don't know what the best disinfecting strategies are on those fronts, and other things too that probably are going to be a concern, and especially I think for the school employees, they're going to be doing some of that work. So again, I don't know that I have any clear guidance at this point in time, but we can kind of keep working on that anyway. So so that's how we'll approach that for the moment anyway. So thanks for those questions. Anyone want to take up the certificate evaluation side of it? I forget who asked which questions, or maybe they were all combined. So.
Commissioner Blomstedt, this is Andrew Dick from ESU 13.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to address the certificate evaluations First off, again, thank you very much for your leadership during this unprecedented time. Very much appreciate what you've been doing for the entire state of Nebraska. The topic of certificate evaluations came up in the issue 13 service area and has also been discussed by administrators across all the issues. I know there's a couple other states out there, Ohio, Oklahoma, North Carolina, that the governor or the commissioner, depending on who has the authority, has relaxed the statutes surrounding certificated evaluations. Ultimately, we would hope that principals, superintendents, whoever's conducting those evaluations will be able to complete an evaluation that would encourage risk-taking of teachers during this time. And teachers in evaluation may not have an adverse effect on future years' evaluations. And so I was very impressed by what the Ohio Department of Education put out. We shared that in terms of they had it broken down to completed educator evaluations, incomplete educator evaluations, and then how that would employment decisions going forward. So any clarity we could get there. I know that there's a couple law firms that have also provided a little bit of guidance, but didn't want to move forward too quickly without potentially some guidance from NDE or even the governor issuing some sort of a temporary suspension of that statute.
Yeah, and actually I appreciate very much the question, because I think that kind of fits in those categories of things underneath the law that might require some of the governor's emergency abilities, but we'll be taking a look at it. I really do appreciate that, and I didn't know who necessarily sent them to us, but I appreciated the Ohio guidance, and we'll kind of gather up with some of that and see if we can work with some of the school attorneys to kind of provide some, kind of at least some approaches to it and be able to come up with something on that front. So I think it's a great question, and thanks for kind of bringing that to my attention. So thanks, Andrew, for that. And then the end of year reporting, I know was several questions maybe, and I don't know if Dan had a lot of them from his area, or if he, or if Larry Ann or Andrew had those in their area as well that they could kind of walk me through a little bit more.
So good afternoon, Commissioner. Dan Schnoes, ESU 3. These questions did come from some of the schools in the ESU 3 area, but really resounded across the state. As we're, now under the directed health measure that we're not going to be back in school for kids being in the building, but we're finishing up virtually with our online learning. Some of the questions are coming up as we get down to the end of the year here and look at reporting in June. And nobody wants to be caught unaware of some things that they need to be turning in. So I think the resolution that you passed with the state board was a good stepping point, the way it seems. But now we're getting questions on, is there a date being looked at for taking the average for average daily membership? How are we going to work with all of our school information systems to get those reporting features in? I'm assuming Power School and Infinite Campus and our SIMS program is all going to be trying to work together to get those. And my understanding is there's some of those discussions being held. We just want to make sure when we get down to June and we're helping all of our schools do our reporting, that we're not missing something that we need to make sure that we're getting in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dan. And kind of as I've been out there saying, don't worry about rules, don't worry about rules, I really have intended that. But the nice part of this, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but the state board kind of giving me some guidance and direction on their resolution is going to allow me to do some written guidance to kind of walk folks through that. So we'll be working on that from attendance. Obviously, what we've talked about on hours, I don't expect folks to be able to report that they've met hours necessarily, but the reality is kind of what do we want you to report. I think that'll get clearer here in the next week or so. I don't think that we kind of have a mixed set of challenges probably around everything from attendance, and even what the governor just talked about a little bit ago of just paying attention to students and families and student conditions is, a challenge and a real concern for all of us. but attendance itself isn't necessarily our concern. I am worried about what it means for school finance because we use average daily attendance. And so I think there's going to be some things that we're going to have to think about. I would be, off the top of my head, I think we'll be kind of looking at membership as a baseline for that. So, and it's not impossible, obviously, that you have students moving out or into your district at this moment in time. So there will be some topics like that to continue to work on, and we'll actually be working on kind of written guidance around all those different fronts. So I hope that'll be helpful. I think also I've had the question about when's the year end, and I maybe kind of rule of thumb for you all would be to say take your current calendar, and I'm not saying you have to stick with it exactly at all, but if you use that as your rule of thumb to know when your school year was ending, I think that makes a lot of sense, and kind of gives you a way to hang close with the schedule that you had at least originally intended. So that's where I'm at on those particular fronts. I don't know, Larry Ann and Dan and Andrew, do you have anything else you want to mention while we got the slide up anyway?
I just have one follow-up question, Commissioner. I think we discussed maybe a week or two ago that there might be a statewide waiver kind of for everybody across the board, that we would just fill one out so schools wouldn't have to fill it out individually. Is there still something in the works with that?
I'm not quite sure what you mean, statewide waiver for Rule 10 or?
For Rule 10 and all the hours and all the attendance and all those requirements?
Well, we're going to be asking essentially kind of like our continuity of learning side. The other thing will be like a one pager that we'll have schools fill out, what they missed. So it won't be great detail, Dan. That would be my intention on that front. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I don't have anything more either, Commissioner. I appreciate the opportunity to speak for our schools in ESU 7 and across the state.
Yeah, I'm glad you could be with us.
I don't have anything else from ESU 13, our area, and echo Larry Ann's comments. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, no, glad to do it. So I'll kind of move on into we've had a commissioners advisory group made up of, I'll say roughly 24 superintendents, 3 from each board district around the state. And we had a meeting last Wednesday where some different themes kind of surfaced. And I think next week I'll be asking a few of the folks from that advisory group to kind of join as we address some of these things. There are some similarities between what I think ESUs and regionally you're having conversations around, but also some things I heard specifically that I'll just kind of run through this list, and then I'm going to come back and have Jamie Jo Thompson from Norfolk. If she's on the panelist list, I can't quite tell, but if she is with us, I'll have her and she can join me in a little conversation about summer school, because she, timely asked me some questions on that front. So, but I did want to just run through these themes that we heard. We certainly heard about impacts on food programs. One of the questions I think I just got maybe today was, are school food workers essential? And that question is as it relates to if we go to any type of shelter at home conversation or whatnot. Again, if the governor was still on, I'd ask him where we're at on that. I don't know if that's changed in his mind yet at this point in time, but I think it's a great question. And then just worrying about employee safety. And so as we continue to watch that topic, I think it's important to know. I did share with the advisory group last Wednesday my concerns about impacts on the summer and even potentially into the fall. When you're trying to predict the future right now, it seems a little hard, but I do want us to be attentive to the types of challenges we might be facing even into the fall. And so I just kind of put that on your mind, not that you don't have enough on your minds already, but we'll be considering that. The Federal CARES Act, and I forget what CARES exactly stands for, but I'm sure it's the kind of the supports and food, supports for funding for different things. One particular provision that we talked about with the Commissioners Advisory Group was, what's this mean for bus and food contracts? And we have Bryce and some of our team, Bryce Wilson and some of our team kind of working on strategies there, I think with some school attorneys. A lot of concerns about broadband and infrastructure access. I'm expecting to have an article or a op-ed piece run in the Omaha World Herald yet this week on my concerns on that front for us as a state and a nation, really. And then the other things I heard were certainly finance impacts at a federal, state, and local, and the revenue impacts that we might be seeing. And again, I just lay that out there as topics that we'll probably discuss a little bit more next week. And then a graduation guidance, which I think Corey Epler will join me in a little while on that front. But Jamie Jo, are you there? And would you like to kind of ask me the questions you had on summer school? And we can kind of discuss it live anyway, so.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yep, I sure can.
Perfect. I have two very separate questions about summer school. The first is in regards to the Nebraska Reading Improvement Act and whether the summer reading program portion of that will be waived if we are unable to hold summer school this summer.
Yeah, and I believe we're going to be working on that very question again with the governor. And our team will be looking at that a little bit more this week. But my understanding is that because of the way it's crafted into the law, we'll actually have to get an exception from the law to deal with that. I certainly encourage, and again, we just don't know what the impacts exactly will be, but I don't expect that you can run summer school in the very traditional sense this summer. I think there's going to have to be some different strategies with public health, and so on that Reading Improvement Act side, we'll be working on an approach there. So.
Okay, then my second question has more to do with the senior high students. We have a pretty extensive summer school program in regards to both credit recovery and just offering our students more options so that they can take more electives and have more freedom during the school year, which actually helps with our class sizes during the fall and the spring semesters as well. So that question is, if we are not able to have students come in and we choose to do an online summer school course through asynchronous courses, will we be able to give students credit for those, even though they won't have seat time? They won't be assigned, a period with a teacher. It would be online with a certified teacher using our core curriculum, just as if they were here.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be my intention that you would be able to offer that for credit. So we might have to kind of keep working with folks a little bit on how to report that and what else we need to do. But I actually think it would be smart to be thinking about those types of summer activities being, certainly in a virtual or like you mentioned, maybe asynchronous is even more flexible for you at this moment in time. So I definitely want to keep working on that with our team, and maybe a little bit later when Corey Epler's on, we can kind of chat through that some more. But I think it's a great point, Jamie Jo. So thanks for raising that question. Is there anything else I can kind of cover for you while you've got me anyway?
No, I would just put a plug in that we continue to look at those options for asynchronous online options as we move forward. I would love for, this situation to maybe have some positive and that we're more flexible with our learning moving forward. And this is certainly one option where we're getting a lot of experience right now.
Yes, we are. So, and I think you're entirely right. I do think there's hopefully some positives that'll come out of this moment anyway, and these times that we can create some additional opportunities and flexibilities around that. So thanks a lot, Jamie Jo, for the question. So
thank you.
I'll just run through a couple slides really quickly with folks. I've certainly we have and probably have a lot of our non-public administrators on with us today. I had a meeting with them on Friday, just a little bit of an introductory to go, what other kind of challenges do you have? And I'll continue to do a meeting specifically around non-public school concerns each week now. But there are several things that are similar to what I think generally that we see with public schools, and just rule and regulation flexibility, and certainly impacts on students and teachers. Certainly the concerns around you know, their situation from a funding stream perspective is obviously different. So an area that we talked about. I will tell you, special education is an area of shared concern, and so I appreciate, because I know we have a lot of partnerships between public and non-public schools for serving special ed students, and obviously this moment in time kind of relies on us being able to do all that. And again, I'll keep up with weekly calls with our non-public school leaders and just thank them for their engagement and their efforts as well. So appreciate that very much. So I think the other part is we have, I think, 15 different Rural 18 interim program schools, and some of these students are actually obviously your students. I think we have a regular meeting now set up with our Rural 18 settings. And they have particular challenges with how to handle the residential treatment side of this, where you're having students that are, you know, 24/7 in the care of these various providers, and you know, Boys Town being among those, Utah Holly among those, and that the fact that they have contracted services is another part of that. Obviously, special education. There are some concerns around health and safety, both for well, for all of the employees, but also for the students. We are seeing that there's a lot of differences in how education is delivered in these settings, and so that's a bit of a challenge, and we'll continue to work with them on that. And then there's really the challenge right now of changes of setting for different students at a moment in time. And, you know, certainly we've been talking a lot about data and shared student responsibilities, and any of you from a school district perspective that have students in one of these other settings, that becomes a special challenge as some students have been attempted to be transitioned at this moment in time. And so that's a bit of work that we really do have to address right now. So again, I'll be meeting with interim program school leaders, with department team on a weekly basis as well. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, just in case you start to hear more on those fronts. We'll keep doing that work. So I think our next slide is just kind of giving you I want to encourage that folks are gathering up those questions, running them through those regional conversations with ESUs. We'll do other things. I want you to continue to submit questions into our website. That's very helpful. And even if you feel like we don't get you an immediate answer, I just want you to know that that we are gathering those things and trying to kind of catch up with the frequently asked questions and other things as well. So appreciate all of that. So now, we've left just about 10 minutes or so, a little bit more to talk with some of our staff around I think 3 big topics, but I'll start off with thanking the state board. I know many of them are probably on the call, but been very appreciative of their leadership and letting me and letting our staff do what we need to do in these moments. And if you didn't see it, the board did pass a resolution that in these kind of unique challenges, being able to address those things. And so this really put us in a position to be able to act as quickly as possible on a lot of different topics. So thanks to the board for that. I think there's several topics that we have, and I think I'll start with this one. I think Corey Epler is going to join me for part of this conversation. But the class of 2020 and worrying about graduation requirements as well as graduations themselves. So 4 quick bullets on that front. I think Corey's going to join me for this.
Yep, I'm here, Commissioner.
Yeah, do you want to walk us through kind of what you're thinking on this side?
Absolutely. So we actually have posted some guidance relative to the class of 2020 on the coronavirus webpage through NDE. It's under resources for schools. So I think we are getting a lot of questions, not just around graduation requirements, but ceremonies. We're specifically talking about the requirements for graduation. And we continue to encourage districts to, first and most importantly, review the status of each senior to determine at what level they have met the graduation requirements. And then from there, many of the requirements are determined by local school board policies. So it may be something that your local board policy may need to be changed relative to additional requirements specifically for the class of 2020. And districts do have latitude in determining what grades to award, if any, for coursework and which coursework is required for credit. The next slide, really what we tried to do was outline some possible options relative to 4 different scenarios of where students may fall. So you may have students who have attained both district graduation requirements, which include the state required credits as well. You may have students who have completed the state requirements but have not met your district requirements. And then within each of those, we've provided some options of how you might handle it. So for example, if you have students that have met the state required graduation credits but have not completed district requirements, your options may include that your local board could modify your district graduation policy to grant a high school diploma. The local board could determine that the coursework completed is sufficient towards awarding credit, or as part of a continuity of learning plan, districts could provide additional learning opportunity for students so that they can meet those requirements. And I think asynchronous learning is a really great option in this space as well. I can say that we know the University of Nebraska High School is offering, I think, up to 10 courses that students would be able to take, specifically those students who may be a little bit further behind. And that would fall into that third category. So you might have students who were on track or they haven't met the minimum requirements but were on track for this semester. As well as even students who were further behind, and so there was some additional work to be completed in that. I also just want to mention there are requirements related to American civics that we're in this transition year for 79-724. So high school seniors do not have to worry about those requirements. But I do think in this alternate learning environment, there may be a space to work towards other students in grades 9, 10, and 11 completing those requirements. And then the guidance also includes some considerations for special education, which I think Amy Rohn was going to talk about. So if you have questions around requirements for graduation, just send me an email. I'm happy to talk through those.
Hey, Corey, while I've got you on the grading, we're also going to put out some recommendations around grading, I believe, right?
We are, and what we're really working on are what I might consider to be broader considerations for teaching and learning, of which grading could be. We're getting a lot of questions around how do we handle grades, and certainly that's going to vary from context to context. I hope as we're having conversations around grading, equity is something that's front and center, because we do think having equitable grading approaches is really important in this space. So that may mean that districts are doing something like a pass-fail option, or that districts are not assigning alphabetic or numeric grades in this setting either, that they're really working towards enrichment and deepening the learning. So it'd be great to have those considerations out by the end of this week, which would include things also around attendance, scheduling, etc.
Next, if I remember right, to talk a little bit around special education and where we're at with IDEA. There we go. So Amy, thanks for joining.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So just some quick IDEA considerations, or as you in Nebraska probably know it as Rule 51, because Rule 51 is our state regulation or guidance around doing all of the IDEA requirements, which are federal requirements, and then also implementing our state statutes as well. So with that, just some reminders that graduating with a regular high school diploma or reaching the maximum age of eligibility both result in termination of a student's eligibility of special education or those services through IDEA. And some things to remember or consider is that an IEP team must meet to review the student's status and issue the appropriate coding for the student a reasonable time before the student's eligibility to be terminated. So with our current directed health measures, we are encouraging that these meetings be held via the telephone or through a virtual platform. And just a reminder that these meetings should include the student if possible. The school district must also provide the student or the IEP team in this context with a summary of performance prior to graduation or ending services because of age. And a summary of performance is just compiles all the information and data that a school system has collected on a student and summarizes it into one document. We just encourage everyone to remember that this is a summary, and the intent of our summary of performance is to provide crucial information to those assisting the student in reaching their post-secondary goals by providing them a document that reflects that for the student. Also, the IEP team may have already provided a notice of graduation or a notice of ending services due to age to certain students. And you may have done all of these things. These are just reminders that they have to take place prior to ending services for students. And then that we also recommend that school districts make every effort to complete these steps in a timely manner. We know that in the world of special education, everything seems pretty timely, and right now that's probably the last thing that you have is time. And so we just encourage you to start thinking about this now and pulling together these teams so that these summary of performances and your graduation completion codings can happen. And please feel free to reach out to me. My email's on the bottom of the slide if you have any questions around this.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And so we're kind of coming to close to the end of time, but one thing I wanted to highlight is obviously Amy and Corey are doing other work with other department, or excuse me, other school district staff, department staff, quite frankly. So this is really just meant to give you a kind of an overview quick, and then we'll continue to provide as much additional additional guidance and opportunities to interact as we go along the way. So the last topic we have for today is around the food security, and I think Sharon Davis is going to join me for this. And we already mentioned kind of what happened out in Kimball. So Sharon, would you walk us through kind of where we're at this moment in time?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to present information today on the Emergency Meals to You program. And this was a pilot program that's been running in Alaska, Texas, and New Mexico. And with the pandemic, they've opened it up to be allowed for use under quarantine or natural disasters. And so with the pandemic and the public health threat, they're opening up what they're calling the Emergency Meals to You, available to schools in primarily rural areas, and that's the key there. You'll see as the eligibility lists that as one of the requirements. So this is a program that's designed to work in rural areas where summer food, the normal operation of summer food doesn't work. There's too far of a distance between schools, or transportation issues, or where schools are coordinating their efforts. You know, it's just too far of a distance for students to get to the meals. So it's an opportunity for a school district to sign up, and the students would receive the food through the mail or FedEx or some other delivery method. And it's a box of food that's nutritious meals, and they're all shelf-stable items, and they provide a package for 2 weeks at a time. So in order for, with Nebraska being so rural, it's a good program that maybe some of our schools can take advantage of. And so in order to be eligible, the school has to have at least a 50% enrollment of free and reduced price students. And they have to be closed for at least 4 weeks. And they have to fall under that designation of rural. And you can check that URL. We're going to have a handout on the resources for schools page, the COVID resources page, so you can see the handout, and it has this information and also the URLs. And so if you look at that map, the purple designates non-rural areas, and Nebraska doesn't have much purple except for in that southeast corner. So you can see that it could be a good program for a lot of schools. Districts that are not rural can also qualify based on transportation barriers. If there's not a mass caterer that could fit the needs of serving that many students, if that's not viable for them, the emergency meals to you could also be another opportunity. The districts do have to provide information regarding the transportation issues. They have to provide that justification if they don't qualify as being a rural school. And so those districts that meet the criteria receive administrative support and technical assistance. So managing the summer food program and being part of that, and what has to be done in order to get the reimbursement for those meals. And then also it helps to connect the school to a vendor that has the capacity to purchase, package, and deliver those boxes that contain the 10 meals. Excuse me. And there's a frequently asked questions link there too that's also part of the handout. There is some responsibility on the side of the school. What happens is they go and they submit their application to the state agency or the Nebraska Department of Education. We check their eligibility status and then approve and review and approve that. And it goes to Baylor University or the Baylor Collaborative Group. And then the school does have to reach out for free and reduced students. That is the one thing about this program. It doesn't serve all students. It just serves students that are identified for free and reduced meals. So that is something that would be a consideration for the school if they wanted to adapt that. And so there's an enrollment process. We were told it takes about 2 weeks to get this program set up. And we have some information, some communication going out from our department or from our agency next week, maybe late this week, on this program and how schools can get established for that. If you're in the situation like Kimball was, where all of a sudden you don't have staff that wants to work and wants to be in an environment or at risk for exposure, then this might be a good backup for the schools to use. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was SNAP benefits. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold, and so I'm losing my voice. SNAP benefits is a program that was part of the CARE Act that came through, and I've been in contact with Melissa Wires from the Department of Health and Human Services. And all family households that are not at the maximum benefit will have their benefits changed so that every household in Nebraska that's eligible for SNAP will receive the maximum benefit possible based on their household size. Their waiver's been submitted and they're waiting for approval, but she anticipates that possibly this month that could be done. And then the other piece that we're working on them with is the pandemic EBT card. And what this is doing is it will give every free and reduced eligible for school meals child, the value added to their card for 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches. And that amount is based on the reimbursement value for those meals. She anticipates that program will be ready, or they'll be ready to do those benefits in May, which is pretty good timing. That's about the time school is out. So maybe the schools might not be providing those breakfast and lunch anymore. We're working with them for students that are directly certified with our system. We can tell them who those students are, and it'll be seamless. There won't be any interaction between the family or the school. The dollars are automatically put on each of those cards. The other piece that we're working with them is trying to identify those students that maybe were identified for meal benefits through an application. And so we're working with comparing the two systems, the direct cert system, comparing our enrollment system that lists the free and reduced students, and trying to determine maybe what students might have been receiving benefits through an application. So we're working with them, trying to get that information out to make it as seamless as possible for the families. And I think the estimate I heard was about $262 per child that would be added to their EBT card. So that's the information we have. Anticipate those benefits sometime in May. Thank you for the opportunity.
Commissioner, I'm unmute your
Yeah, thank you. So thanks, Sharon. Thanks for that information. Obviously, a lot of details that we'll be sharing in other ways as well, but I wanted to have you have a good sense of that. This is kind of in conclusion, a quote that we came across or somehow, and I think Zainab probably came across the graphic, but you know, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And I kind of feel like that's been where we're at on a lot of fronts. Thanks to everyone for you continuing to move forward and help your students and your families. We'll keep moving forward at the agency. Please continue to submit questions onto that contact form, and we'll certainly kind of keep working and keep moving forward ourselves and getting you answers as quickly as we can on a lot of different fronts. So thanks everyone. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you next Monday, if not sooner, in some fashion. So thanks a lot.